and I thank everyone for being here for an amazing presentation by an amazing student, Erin Pfeifer, who is finishing up before her student teaching comes up next semester, her honors project that she has worked really hard on. When we were going through ideas here, this took some really major brain waves, and I'm hoping to transfer all of that energy, yes, to your audience. And as she knows, we should all be crying in tears from the hard work that we're doing. Thank you, Erin. Yes. Legislative priorities.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Morales. All right. Well, yes, thank you guys so much for coming. It's so good to see a bunch of familiar faces, friends, family. You've all supported my life in one way or another. So, yeah, thank you for coming. So, my presentation is titled Legislative Priorities, an ideological critical analysis of the Nebraska Department of Education goals using speech and debate as a case study. So, if you've known me for any moment of my life, you know I like to talk. And you also know that I've been competing in speech since the 5th grade, and it's been, one of the biggest activities I've been involved in. As my siblings, they may tell you I talk a little too much, but I just have a lot to say and share with others. But I know that this isn't necessarily the case with a lot of high school students. In fact, a lot of students struggle with public speaking, and they fear sharing their ideas with others for a multitude of reasons, which I'll cover here in a second. Speech and debate, or forensics practices, have taken a steep decline in the 21st century because of the stressed importance of STEM content areas. And this also results from a lack of room for teachers to teach outside what is necessary for the test. The result is that voices aren't shared, but silenced, and critical thinking is missing from the classroom experience. So through this paper, my goal is to show that we need speech and debate practices back in our high school curriculum through a variety of different content areas, and I will show how that all works. But something I want to note is I'm not saying that every class has to be having speeches written hardcore, informative, persuasive format. I know that's not doable for a bunch of content areas. However, there are ways that we can wiggle those practices into every content area in order for the student to learn the process of using their own voice. You may also notice that legislative priorities is in the angled brackets, and I'll kind of explain why that is. This is because the words are better defined together than they are separate. It makes it an ideology. And so this ideology assumes that the Nebraska Department of Education has created these legislative priorities, keeping in mind the best interest of their constituents, and the constituents can then trust that the NDE has their best interest in mind. So a little overview of what we're going to cover today. I'm going to go over what the legislative priorities are, how it works as an ideology and what it works with, if the priorities are being achieved, how we can improve our education in Nebraska, the fears and misconceptions that come from this type of practices, and then we will also cover how we can cover speech and debate practices within the classroom through legislative priorities equaling excellence, and then finally I'll add some concluding remarks and leave time for questions. So, Nebraska Department of Education legislative priorities. What are they and what do they aim to achieve? So as you see, they are split into 3 different tenets: leadership, success, access, and support, teaching, learning, and serving. Each of these tenets have different strategies that the NDE recommends teachers use in order to cover them, and the leadership in particular contains strategies that the NDE uses to cover. And yeah, basically these are just the goals that they want every school to achieve and the department itself to achieve in order to ensure that the schools are doing a good job. So why are we using these legislative priorities? Well, the answer is we have an ideology that drives them. So the priorities are an ideology of itself, however, excellence works alongside it in order to give it relevance. Because we want our students to be excellent, we have these priorities in place so they may be excellent. That's kind of the idea. So yeah, these 2 factors back my paper that I wrote about with an ideological analysis. I covered an artifact being the goals or legislative priorities, and I explained how excellence worked through them in order to show if the Nebraska Department of Education was doing a good job of achieving them or not. And I also included equity in there because it was kind of a secondary ideology that I came to see through the goals. through the legislative priorities. It kind of works in a hierarchy. If we achieve equity, we are being excellent, and therefore we are achieving the priorities. That's kind of how I can explain that. So, are we reaching these legislative priorities? Well, the simple answer is we are not. With the legislative priorities in mind, they cannot be achieved because of how the education system currently views excellence. Right now, the school's definition of excellence is, it's very objective and it's focusing on the what. The what being funding, like we can't be excellent if we don't have more money, and also learning for the test, like I aforementioned. If we continue to just learn facts for the test, learning the what, we are missing out on a world of the how, or the processes that go behind the learning. So if educators continue to only look towards the what, they won't find excellence or success. So therefore, students need to learn the how, the processes of information that they are retaining. And this can be done through speech and debate practices. So something I wanted to mention when we go into speech and debate education practices, the 19th and 20th century was doing it right. They had a plethora of different ways that they included speech education into a variety of content areas. And yeah, I'll just kind of list what that looked like. They taught to form the whole person because educators recognized that education needed to be useful towards citizenship and prosperity of the country's inhabitants. So it fulfilled that civic duty. To accomplish this, they had well-developed speech training, meaning the teachers were also better educated in speech education. Programs were not limited to oral reading, but also included dramatic performances, spelling bees, arithmetic matches, and debates, all within the classroom. Oral and written language were greatly emphasized. Lessons were geared towards students' experiences and everyday language, and student-led discussion became popular and developed abilities to think on one's feet, foster good listening habits, and grow conversational ability. So all this looks great, right? Why don't we have it still today? Well, as I was doing my research, I found out it was because the teachers, it became harder to balance the speech education along with the education they were already doing. Therefore, that was kind of one of the first things to be cut in teacher preparation programs. And therefore, because the teachers were not learning about it, their students weren't going to learn about it, and it kind of just became a vicious cycle. But if we brought these back today, in a better fashion than we are currently, these are just some of the characteristics that students would be able to see and gain. Speech and debate education gives students an independent route in their education. They can take their education in their own hands. It helps students to further their previous knowledge in order to make new connections, improves test scores, teaches how to express thoughts eloquently in academic work, develops critical thinking and research skills, builds confidence in public speaking and personal voice, which we'll touch on later, and classes are more rigorous and rewarding. And it also teaches students how to search for the truth. Now, you might notice that the T on truth is capitalized. I did that on purpose. Capital T truth is more than objective truth being just factual information. Capital T truth follows more of who we are as humans, what we strive for, what our goals are, and if the students can learn more about how they can search for truth and search for these ideas of their humanity, they will become a better formed person and therefore be able to complete their civic duties more efficiently. So, of course, there are some fears and misconceptions when it comes to speech and debate education. These are just a couple, well, 3 of them, but these are the most important ones that I'd like to touch on. So, number 1, I'm not smart enough. Now, this fear comes from the student's perspective. They fear that to share their voice, they don't want to share their voice because they don't want to be wrong and be subject to peer judgment. Vulnerability is scary. Yeah, that makes sense. However, the goal of speech and debate practices is for students to realize that by sharing their ideas, they won't be objectively wrong. If they're going through the processes, they may come to realize that, oh, this part of my processing is actually right, or, oh, by going through this process, I can see why I'm wrong, not just objectively, I'm wrong. And that way, it forms their mind to, make those new connections and critically think through those issues to find the best idea, aka the capital T, truth. And practice makes perfect. So although students may not want to do it, and I'll touch that on the second misconception, it does need to be done, and students will get better at speaking their minds if they practice it. So yes, from the teacher, students will not engage. Teachers fear that if they force students to participate in speech and debate practices, the students will simply avoid the project or not put forth their whole effort. Again, it's a very real thing that happens in our classrooms. However, ignorance is not bliss. If we avoid the opportunity to better the students by using these forensic practices, they will be set back. They will not be able to make those connections if they continue to focus solely on the what. So teachers, however, should know their students well enough to challenge them. They know that their students come from a variety of different speaking capabilities. So, for example, I was talkative. So, in classes, I was lucky enough for my teachers to recognize that and be like, okay, let's channel that into one concrete idea rather than your mind kind of being everywhere, you're just spewing knowledge left and right. However, for someone who can't speak or does not like to speak as much, they may push them or challenge them just enough to speak their voice in those smaller capacities. The misconception basically sums up, though, that students need to learn how to speak for the sake of their future. If they do not learn how to use these strategies in their daily life, they will not be able to critically think and therefore push their critical thinking to where it needs to be. And then the third misconception is forensics won't work in the curriculum. This one simply false, and I'm going to explain why. So, legislative priorities equals excellence. If we can achieve both those together, that's how students will succeed. But the only way we can do that with the speech and debate practices is by actually implementing them. So how can they be implemented? Well, let's go through them. So English Language Arts Education, or ELA, this one is what most people think of when they think of speaking in classrooms, but it can be a lot more than that when you connect it to literature as well. So this could look like group presentations, individual presentations, writing and delivering speeches, Socratic seminars, book talks, anything like that. Socratic seminars, if you are unaware, they're basically this format where students, they prepare before the class, reading over a text, writing down questions, annotating, and then they bring their knowledge, and with the teacher moderating the activity, they answer the questions, and the students then can either rebuttal or agree with them, and it's just getting those ideas out there using student voice. In the math classroom, you can use problem walkthroughs, explanations led by each student, creating and sharing mnemonic devices with the class to remember theorems, small group work on homework problems. These are all just simple ways that we can get the student voice into the classroom. Biology, chemistry, anatomy, physics, aka basic science, group presentations, individual presentations, reading one's own written essay about a topic and its relevance to someone's own life, and Socratic seminars. You're going to notice that Socratic seminars, in a lot of these, it can be used in virtually any content area, so I highly recommend. History and social sciences, Socratic seminars, small group discussions, group presentations, individual presentations, and historical figure presentations. Again, getting the voice out there. Now, for STS, or Science and Technology Studies, and Family and Consumer Sciences, these ones are the same kind of layout that we can use this for. Project demonstrations to the class, or how-tos, and then small group projects utilizing problem solving with minimal teacher involvement. The idea here is to have the students be more hands-on with their learning, because they're already doing such hand-on activities, they should be able to explain those processes as well. So if we teach the student to not only do the activity, but explain the activity, then the connections will be much stronger, and therefore a better education. Okay, so for music, solos, class debates or discussions on the best times of music, instruments, composers, etc., backed with research and own personal experiences. With music, and it's kind of the same way with art, it's harder because it's already art in a way, both forms are. But just by adding, again, that discussion, that voice, students can make connections from their own life to the content and then see better importance. And again, form their own voice. Okay, so then agriculture. Group presentations, individual presentations, Socratic seminars, debating agricultural topics and problems and how they can be solved, and then demonstrations or how-tos. So something that I've noticed in agriculture is that FFA already does a really, really good job of these. There's LDEs and CDEs. Don't ask me to remember what they stand for off the top of my head. But LDEs are basically made for students to make a speech about an ag-related topic, and then they share their ideas with judges, and they get judged on that. CDEs. There's things called ag demos, where they talk through the process of something, and then they're judged, and the judge asks them questions about it, and that's helping them make those connections. So if FFA can do it as an extracurricular, why can't we add those into the classroom and have that be more of a content thing? And then finally, PE. Games that require teamwork, collaboration, and lectures that teach students how to encourage each other and act with kindness. So this one is kind of interesting because it's already very hands-on and students are already having to talk to each other in these sport formats anyway. But the goal here is to basically teach them how to speak well. So use their voice in a way that isn't going to put others down, or as we learn in argumentation, attacking the person rather than the idea. We want to attack the idea. So if you teach these kind of things in classroom discussion through PE, again, the whole person will just be better formed. Okay. So, finally, some concluding remarks. When I have talked about this topic with my family and friends, I have definitely received some pushback. I have people in my family and in my friend group who aren't that keen to talking in front of people, so I just wanted to share some of the questions that I have received when talking about it. I fear talking in front of others. Why is this helpful? I'm just going to truck as a career. Why do I need to learn how to talk fancy? Why do students need to have a voice? Like I said, these are questions that I have actually received. So I would like to offer you a theory. It's called the Spiral of Silence by Elizabeth Noel Newman. This theory claims that individuals become are more comfortable with sharing their opinion when they know that their personal opinion is shared throughout a group. However, if their opinion is contrary to the rest of the group, then they will subject themselves to silence because they would rather not have an opinion at all than be judged for their opinion. This is easily seen in classroom settings because peer judgment is a very, very real thing, especially at that age. So students don't want to share their ideas because they fear being wrong, and therefore everyone remains silent. But if everyone remains silent, no ideas to better our state, nation, or world will be shared. Critical thinking skills will continue to decline, and people accept the status quo because they are too scared to challenge it. If we don't teach our students how to use their voice, go through these processes in the school system, we are not going to have the critical thinking skills necessary to further our nation, to change the way that the world is maybe currently looking. We need to have new voices to bring those new ideas. If there's no pushback, our world will be subject to mediocrity. So, a little fear of public speaking is nothing compared to losing our collective ability to critically think. This is crucial. As the great professor and my honors advisor, Dr. Teresa Morales, has said multiple times, she gives a Harvard education at a Wayne State price. She challenges the limitations of the abilities that each student believes that they have by pushing them to think past the margins, to make connections and speak their mind about a topic, no matter how controversial they may be. If I can give my own students half of the experience Dr. Morales has given me, I will retire knowing that I made a difference in the future of the students who are to one day lead our nation with critical thinking skills and the ability to share their voices in an impactful way. That's the dream. I want to be able to change those students' minds so that they know that their voice is necessary, their voice is good, and it needs to be heard. So I would like to make sure Dr. Morales gets a very nice thank you. I really appreciate all the work you've done for me this semester. It's been a fantastic time just meeting with you and getting those ideas, so I thank you so much. But yeah, now we can take questions.